My name is Rozemaie Claeys, and together with Marjolein and Els Schipts, we work for AG Vespa, the autonomous city company linked to the municipality of Antwerp. With our development, with our department of city projects, we support the city with the urban planning projects. Today, we would like to introduce you to the innovative city port, which isn't really an architecture project, but an ongoing urban process that we collaborated, among others, with Bert Gellynck from 1010 Architecture and Urbanism, Jan Terwecoren from ARCHITECTUURPLATFORM TERWECOREN VERDICKT, and Mark Brearley, professor at London Metropolitan University. They all joined this presentation today to elaborate on their work within the process. So I'll start with a short introduction on the location, and I will give you a quick overview of the process that we went through. Afterwards, Mark, Bert, and Jan will go deeper in their contribution. At the end, I'll try and make a conclusion and a short reflection on where we are today and what are our perspectives for the future. So the concept of innovative city port was launched in 2016 for the second phase of het Eilandje. Het Eilandje, which is a redevelopment of an historic port of Antwerp. The aim was to retain space for innovation and production in the city and to create a place where the relationship between city and port could be re-anchored. The approach was part of a mind shift in urban planning. It can be seen actually as a reaction to the practices that we use since the mid-90s in Antwerp and probably many more European cities. The aim was for decades to counter the city flight and degradation. Spatial planning was actively used as an instrument to improve socio-economic urban fabric through strategic interventions. So the redevelopment of het Eilandje fits in this first trend. Part of the historic port is transformed to a dynamic district with new homes, high quality public domain, and lots of facilities like museums, schools, also offices and shops. This approach paid off. The city center of Antwerp once again became an attractive place to live, and het Eilandje became a vivid part of this center. But it also resulted in an increased pressure on real estate. This, combined with the growing sensitivity to disturbance by neighborhoods, it became more and more difficult for companies to remain in the urban environment. So throughout this transformation, we saw that the approach resulted in a displacement of urban economics to more peripheral locations. Although the realization grew that the decrease of economic vibrancy was a threat to the identity of the city, there were no good and right answers to how economy could be reintegrated in the city fabric. At the start of our process in 2016, we were therefore very inspired by the work and lectures of Mark Brearley. The realization grew that specific segments of the industry do thrive within the city because of the advantages of the urban environment, like for instance, the low and highly skilled personnel that is endless, the proximity of schools and universities, which can lead to exchange of knowledge and inspire new economies. And furthermore, the city and the port form a concentrated market of raw material. But it also allows economy to continue to enrich and define the city. Mark's work shows how important it is to incorporate productive economy within the planning practices. These insights made us notice that the northern part of the city was potentially very attractive for modern entrepreneurs. The proximity, the knowledge of knowledge institutions and the new city center hospital could initiate a new dynamic. But also in terms of mobility, the connection to both urban networks and regional road and water systems are very unique for the area. Recently, the whole area is also connected to the tram network, making sustainable logistics an obvious choice. Besides that, the World Port of Antwerp is nearby, which means that growth opportunities are close. And on the other hand, the port also started looking at the city with a new perspective. Since innovation became crucial for a world port to remain competitive, the knowledge capacity of the city became more crucial for the port to remain world-class. It was therefore decided to shift the planning focus for Eilandje second phase from residential developments to more productive companies. The idea of shift was translated into the title Innovative City Port for the redevelopment of this area. It is with this title that we set goals, but we missed the handles we normally use for residential revitalization and also the approach that we know for more traditional business parks doesn't seem the right choice for this area. The area had to be part of the city, and the scarce space had to be used efficiently and made attractive for companies thriving in an urban environment. We therefore appointed 1010 architects and urbanists with Bert Gellynck in cooperation with Drift and David Toge to guide us in mapping out the potential and imagination of the area. With their help, we succeeded in 2018 to put this area on the agenda of the political decision makers with a new perspective. Yet, it also became clear that the legal framework needed more refinements and developers needed to be guided in this transformation. When in 2020, the property of Kempeneiland was transferred from the Harbour Authority to the city got a new role as initiator of new developments. Therefore, we asked ARCHITECTUURPLATFORM TERWECOREN VERDICKT with Jan, in cooperation with Dus and Mark Brearley, to research the translation of the vision made by 1010 into possible tangible handles. I leave it to here for the introduction and happily pass the word to the other speakers for a more substantive presentation of their contribution to our process.
I'm Mark Brearley from London, a bigger picture few minutes from me. There's been a long swinging momentum behind the expulsion of industry from our cities. A spontaneous migration got going about 100 years ago, when easy road transport and electricity from a grid offered a liberation, when aspirations tended to be anti-urban, focused on escape, when big-scale government intervention steered towards the neat and the segregated, the realization that the results of this cleaving apart may not be all good, that much is being lost along the way, that the dynamic of cities and of diverse industrial economies can end up denuded, weakened, has taken a long time to sink in. The likes of Jane Jacobs were raising the alarm mid-century, and a sense that something's wrong, that the strip-out trend was going too far, that full-on economic apartheid should not be the aim, has been building ever since. For those of us worrying about this matter, making the argument that good cities have it all are places that can fully welcome the past decade has been good. The mood seems at last to be changing. There is now a chance to alter the trends, build enthusiasm around alternative objectives. I'm telling you this because it's the context for this bold thinking going on in Antwerp, the reappraisal of how port and city should meet, how they can be in an embrace, each making the other stronger. Look wider. Many are speaking up again for the urban, for the diverse, observing, revealing, describing the city we want, devising the means to shape it. We have to be inventive, of course. We need industrial space, standalone, and in mixed developments, and we have to make new ways of being alongside it, sometimes below other uses. And in cities like yours and mine, we have no alternative but to make industrial accommodation away from the ground floor become a significant part of the provision. We need the people who deliver industrial accommodation to think city. The job includes hunting for examples, humble shop and factory in Leighton, marquees, metal workers in a housing block here in Vienna, housing above storage, loading and heavy goods vehicles in Delft. Highway maintenance depot slipped into Munich, a big tire warehouse, happy alongside housing and showrooms in Buda. In Napoli, car repairers alongside shops and cafes down in the far south of Italy, the same in Brussels. While up in Rotterdam, adeptly tucked below flats in one of those superb mid-century frontage and yard blocks. In London, hosted by a classic piece of high street depth. In Kortrijk, there is a filigree of industry weaved in with the domestic. In that city's Bissegem area, we counted 80 small clusters of embedded industry, all thriving and accepted. In Salento, I came across a pasta shop with street frontage, and behind it, they have the factory, 200 square meters embedded in the block and another space in the nearby industrial area. They work between the two, proud to export to Germany. And we can do more like London's bus garages, immovable and embraced, learning from the breathtaking integration of the Godiva factory into a super varied Brussels block. Occasionally, the examples are more recent and new, like this spontaneous development in Hevaart. Residential above the entrance to a huge used car export yard, again in Brussels, from the 80s, double-decker logistics. In Western Flanders, everywhere housing and industry are developed together and alongside, as they have been for a long time. Product of an entrepreneurial culture. And as London grows, we look at the developments that could so easily incorporate more mix, welcome in the bigger spaces we need, but currently do not. Here, near my own factory, a large housing development has big span spaces for a school, but that could just as well have been a factory or a courier depot or a taxi repair workshop. In Barking, there is a huge new Asda supermarket with housing above. The big lorries and the yard and the noisy plant are all incorporated into the building. If that's possible, then why not food producers, fabricators, joiners, builders, merchants? Indeed, recently finished near King's Cross is a large builders merchants with student living above. Meanwhile, in Germany, they're building Gewerbehof, multi-story workshop buildings to house businesses priced out of other accommodation in the inner city. In Hamburg, near the middle of the city, this one is just completed and now fully let. 100 industrial units, 4 floors, giant goods lifts. Here in West London, an aggregate wharf with residential is proposed. It doesn't get much bolder. And by the same river, this 3-story multi-user logistics building slotted into a constrained urban site will soon commence. It's a type that's taking hold in Europe, a 2-level one for IKEA in Paris. In London, global industrial developer Goodman just bought 4 hectares, only a few kilometers from the center of the city, for a record eye-watering £7.4 million per acre. It's rumored they could do industrial on 6 stories. 5 years ago, Atelier Brussels Productive Metropolis kicked off, sponsored by the governments of Flanders and Brussels. They asked me in as the Atelier Master. It's been part of an attitude-shifting process about motivation and intent, as well as about design and planning. We worked through a series of sessions, nurturing interests, sharing. The first focus was on areas of Brussels, where there is immediate prospect of change and significant public authority leverage. Design teams explored the type challenges, how to incorporate industrial accommodation into new mixed developments in a way that Brussels has achieved brilliantly in the past, but forgot how to do during recent decades. We showed at the 2016 Rotterdam Architecture Biennale arguing that we should no longer push away economic diversity. We shared some of the Brussels explorations about the value of embracing mix, no longer brushing aside. We showed the first outcomes of what the architects were doing. We drew people in. Back in Brussels, the supporters got stronger. Understanding and enthusiasm has blossomed. We took that show on tour, then more workshops, 20 in all, delving into the intensification of Buda industrial area in the north of the city and in the southern Sene Valley, considering the Catala and Audi expansion sites. How could plans get better, suggesting new multi-level industrial by the canal and in Bordeaux and around Lefebvre-Straat. In cities like Brussels, some of the first steps have been taken. Plans are drawn, bold ones. Developments are starting to appear that carefully combine big, deep spaces, able to take industry in a way that works with housing, with all the other activities of the city. It's beginning to come real, with excellent city dev leading the charge, housing and industry together. What about ports? In 1915, Wyndham Lewis celebrated the ports he knew in his half-deranged Blast magazine. Ports, restless machines of scooped-out basins, heavy insect dredgers, monotonous cranes, stations, lighthouses, blazing through the frosty starlight, cutting the storm like a cake, beaks of infant boats side by side, heavy chaos of wharves, steep walls of factories. Bless these machines that work the little boats across clean liquid space in beelines. Bless the great ports, Hull, Liverpool, Newcastle on Tyne, Bristol, Glasgow. Bless England, industrial, island machine, pyramidal. But such celebration is unusual. Society has become ever more divorced from the worlds of shipping and freight, such that even in cities such as Ghent, Antwerp, and Rotterdam, with port areas larger than the associated cities, it's now possible to not even be aware that the port is there. It's ignored, invisible to all except the thousands who work there. Those cities have turned away from the ports that are the basis of their prosperity. Miracles on a vast scale, ever becoming more sophisticated. That feels wrong. As it happens, at around the same time that I joined some of these conversations about the fresh thinking in Antwerp, I was invited to speak at the annual conference of the European Seaports Organization. They have the same worries, realizing that Europe's ports, nearly all of them associated with cities, need to refresh the relationship, reconnect, emphasize again that the proximity brings benefits to all, refresh the visibility and the synergy. Antwerp's port is not just hugely successful, it's also one of the world's most progressive, a wonderful partner for the more domestic parts of that city. It's together that they are urban.
Hi everyone, my name is Bert Gellynck and I'm representing 1010 Architecture Urbanism. We are the urban planning and design office that was in charge of the creation of the spatial and programmatic framework for the innovative city port. As Mark already said, a good city has industry. But what kind of industry are we actually talking about? And what does this statement mean for the Eiland in Antwerp on the hinge between a world port, the city, and the Albert Canal? In recent decades, industry has massively left our cities for distant countries because of environmental problems and high labor costs. However, we are increasingly aware that going further in today's globalization is not the answer to our current climate and economic challenges, and that in the future it will again be important to produce more locally. Unfortunately, The industry of tomorrow has a different face, without smoking chimneys and liters of wastewater dumped untreated into the rivers. City ports can play an important role for productive companies that want to innovate. They are an interesting location for companies active in the fields of energy transition, urban logistics, small-scale manufacturing, maritime services and technology, and the transport and processing of raw materials. In a comparative study of 11 different urban port areas, we examined the type of activities that take place there and why specific companies chose for a certain location. This included the availability of transport infrastructure for both freight and staff, the surface area of the plots, the presence of specific knowledge institutions, and the availability of skilled staff in the vicinity. We also discovered that some port zones function as working environments for specific economic sectors, but that these different environments are spatially interrelated and collaborations do exist between different enterprises. The water acts as a link here and ensures that these different places can be considered together as an economic ecosystem. Innovation, specific working environments. That sounds fantastic, right? But how do you make it happen at this specific location in Antwerp? And what do we do with all these existing companies and users of the area? We can't just chase them away, can we? After all, we're not starting from a blank sheet. At the beginning of the assignment, as urban planners, we set to work on 3 parallel tracks. First, we made a classic spatial analysis of the area and inventoried the interesting infrastructure and characteristic places and buildings. Broadly speaking, this reads like 3 islands. The Mexico-Eiland, surrounded by water on 4 sides, with many trucks and logistics buildings, a wide traffic road connecting to the World Port and the highway, but also the headquarters of the Antwerp Port Authority and a tram line to the city center. Steenborgerweert, historic industrial district, once built in the beds of the Schijn River, and now enclosed between large-scale train and car infrastructure. The water edges are temporarily occupied for soil transshipment, and inside the fine-grained building tissue, we can find a broad variety of enterprises active in car retail, maritime services and logistics, and the construction sector. On the southern edge, a recently built canal will partly resolve the flooding issues Steenborgerweert is regularly struggling with, but more water-resilient measures will be needed in the future. Kempeneiland, a peninsula connected to the historic city, with a pleasure marina, but also an old customs warehouse and a huge platform for temporary use, such as parking for trucks or buses. All the buildings here were never conceived for eternity, but some of them definitely have patrimonial value. In addition, we looked at how the space is already being used today. We discovered a kaleidoscope of different companies active in the maritime sector, storage and logistics, wholesale and retail trade, food production, manufacturing, and a little bit of hospitality. Apart from a historic small housing block in Steenborgerweert, no one lives in this area on a permanent basis. And we also learned that some companies were owning the land they are settled on, while others depend on a concession from the Antwerp Port Authority, with different dates for the end or renewal of the contract. This means in any case that the renewal and transformation to the innovative city port will be a transition that will have to happen step by step. And last but not least, we interviewed several companies already established in the area. In the first step, we had individual discussions which gave us a better understanding of their current activity. But we also learned what innovation means to them, what they themselves think their activity will look like in, say, 20 years' time. In the second step, we brought them together around the table, together with policymakers, knowledge institutions, and representatives of various startups interested in the area as possible future location. Together, we brainstormed about the existing and potential qualities of the 3 islands and how they could be transformed in the future to develop the ambitions of the innovative city port. The process of research by design resulted in a spatial framework within which we showed opportunities for innovation and the development of 3 specific environments based on the existing characteristics on the area. The Mexico-Eiland as an environment for urban and added value logistics and waterbound activities, Steenborgerweert as a circular makers district, and Kempeneiland as an innovation city dock. Mexico-Eiland is characterized by large building blocks and a wide quay for transshipment on the side of the Albert Canal. It is the place par excellence for water-related activities. On the side of the Albert Canal, a wide quay will be constructed suitable for intensive transshipment. On the Houthoek side, the quay will be conceived as a public space where transshipment of goods will be possible along with other forms of temporary use of space. The eastern edge of the island is well served by the tram. This makes this choice more suitable for companies with a higher proportion of staff or activities of commercial nature. In the center of the island, there will be a green wide corridor for the buffering of rainwater and a bicycle access between the city and the port. The corridor will also ensure that Mexico-Eiland, despite its large-scale blocks of industrial nature, can become a pleasant place to work. Steenborgerweert consists of historically grown fabric on private plots. Development will take here place step by step. It's an important location for craft businesses that provide services to the city. It's an area that is suitable for densification, but where urgent flooding problems must also be taken into account. Because the plots are rather small compared to the other 2 islands, stacked development of the businesses here is a must. This typology refers to the historical warehouses that used to be numerous in the city of Antwerp. And finally, Kempeneiland is the place for experimentation. The water surface of the Asia dock will become a laboratory for scientific experimentation and temporary use. Thanks to 2 new bicycle bridges, the head of the island will become the epicenter of the innovation port, a meeting place for residents and entrepreneurs. The existing heritage will also be given a new purpose, such as the old grain silos on the edge of the dock. The former customs warehouse is making way for a new commercial building, but Jan will tell you more about that now.
Hello, I'm Jan Terwecoren from ARCHITECTUURPLATFORM TERWECOREN VERDICKT. And we work together with Dus and Mark Brearley on the sub-area of Kempeneiland, Asia Dock in the innovative city port Antwerp. As already explained by the previous speakers, the innovative city port consists of several complementary sub-areas. The Kempeneiland sub-area, in red, focuses on innovative industry linked to the use of a low dynamic dock, the Asia dock. Why low dynamic? Because of the limited access by a new bicycle bridge on the northern edge of the dock, but therefore very appropriate for testing and trials. The area aims to attract both industrial production and knowledge clusters and aspires to develop into a fully fledged city district where human encounters take center stage. In the development of Kempeneiland, we made a distinction between the framework and the fields. The framework has an inert character and consists of several layers: mobility, green-blue network, public space, etc. As already mentioned, the head of the peninsula of Kempeneiland will become the epicenter of the innovative city port. We decided to design this epicenter as a park from which the activity on the water can be observed. The program to animate the park is accommodated in the plinth of 3 tower volumes on the edge of the park and in park pavilions. The Kempeneiland Peninsula is divided into a western soft urban side and a hard eastern side for goods supply. Both sides are connected by public space, perspectives and views, so that the industrial activity simultaneously becomes a theater for the city. Boats, mooring, forklifts, driving back and forth, cranes turning away, testings on the water. Here we can see the west side of the peninsula Kempeneiland. This is a view on the Central Park in the north. On the left side, we can see a part of the yard. In contrast to the framework, the fields have a more dynamic character, typical for economic activity. It was a challenge to work out an urban typology that is urban, while at the same time remaining functional and flexible for economic actors. For us, urban meant using the surface area sparingly and therefore searching for a compact, dense, vertical organized typology. The use of the roof for collective space, energy use and water recycling was also obvious to us. Functional implies that it corresponds to the preferences of regional entrepreneurs. For example, Flemish companies do not like to depend only on goods lifts, and for some entrepreneurs, the floors must be accessible by vans. The parking ratio for vans and visitors is another functional condition. Flexible means that companies can grow, shrink, expand, disappear, etc. Therefore, a modular structure was assumed. Flexible means also an offering of a variation in space. Huge central halls versus modular private units, for example. And finally, we can imagine that buildings survive their initial program and they have to be adaptable to other uses. For this reason, the middle part of the productive building blocks on Kempeneiland are less inert than the outer edges. The dimensions of 19 meters make them very suitable for long-term redevelopment as homes or offices. A view on the yard and production building blocks from the south. To design the vertical stacked productive building blocks, we looked at the organization of historical and contemporary examples and what we could learn from them in terms of building depths, vertical and horizontal circulation of goods, daylighting, variation of industrial spaces, modularity, and flexibility. The three building blocks on Kempeneiland are similar. The northernmost block differs in that it has a higher atelier tower overlooking the Central Park and the harbour area. For the fields on the peninsula of Kempeneiland, we developed three types, each based on additional preconditions of productivity. The first type assumes large, deep spaces on the ground floor. The upper floors contain smaller units that are accessible by goods lifts. The second type is based on a large shared production hall to which various production units can have access. This huge hall is a link between the private production unit on the one hand and the quay and the innovation dock on the other. In this way, goods and prototypes can be built in the hall and driven directly into the dock. The production units on the upper floors are in this version accessible by vans and goods lifts. A second version has also been developed which only uses goods lifts to access the upper floors. The third type is based on modular private production units. In a first version, the floors are accessed by ramps. Vans can be loaded or unloaded and parked right in front of the unit. Additional parking is provided on mezzanines, avoiding the construction of an underground car parking. Here too, a second version has been developed which only uses good lifts to access the upper floors. This is an overview of Kempeneiland Asia Dock. 5 phases were worked out for the development. In a first phase, a cargo bridge for cargo bikes will be built in the north, and temporary use of the existing customs warehouse will be organized to attract the target group of innovative industries and knowledge clusters. In a second phase, the east-west cycle axis will be realized. The third, fourth, and fifth phases include the construction of the productive building blocks, starting in the south and moving up to the north. A view from the south on the development of Kempeneiland. On the right-hand side, you can see the Rozemie grain silo, about which I would also like to tell you something in the context of this development. The silo is located in a very strategic spot that connects the Spoor Noord Park with the industrial hinterland towards the port. Due to its strategic position and its attractive industrial architecture, the silo acts as a flagpole for the innovative city port. 2 strategies were developed for the silo. The first maximizes the volume to provide working space for workshops. For this, the vertical inner concrete walls are opened up. A second scenario is based more on the existing silo architecture and starts from the impressionant vertical space to realize one large spatial work studio. On the left, a view on a double-height workshop in the silo. On the right, the second option with the large spatial workshop. And finally, a picture of the roof terrace with a view on the port.
I promise to conclude with a reflection on where we are today and maybe give some perspectives on the future. As we made big steps in terms of vision and potential spatial translation of the vision, we also experienced the tension between long-term plans and short-term needs of ongoing economies. Therefore, we started some more hands-on research by design with Jan and his team. Within, we tried to connect existing companies in search for space with potential locations within our area. We learned from these exercises that even when the company doesn't end up in this area, it appears to be a very good method to inspire landowners, developers, businesses, and also decision makers. This process with potential companies and developers is still going on and seems crucial in closing the gap between planning and projects. Also, it's important to mention our collaboration with the City Department of Economy in this regard, given their crucial contribution to the whole process. Throughout these very specific case studies, we also experienced that the strengths and the weaknesses of the current legal spatial framework. Although it was very important in the beginning of the process to preserve the existing framework to prevent speculation, something we definitely found out in the first phase of het Eilandje. Now, we recently started to revise the framework based on the presented vision. Unfortunately, this ongoing process are still too preliminary to share to you today, but hopefully in the near future, we can share more lessons learned on what we are doing today. But for now, I hope this story can already inspire also other cities in their process to integrate future-proof economies using planning and long-term goals in combination with research by design to inspire and to realize. Thank you for taking the time to listen and to the story of the innovative city port of Antwerp.
At Brickworks Vande Moortel, we make high-quality bricks, slips and clay pavers in unique colors and sizes. From our new brick lab in Belgium, we support architects in the UK and around Europe. As a partner, we collaborate with the architect to transform his vision into reality with an open mind, technical knowledge and tailor-made solutions. As a family-held company, we remain accessible at all levels, which makes our company extremely customer-focused. In all those years, we never lost our core values and stand for sustainability, quality, teamwork, and of course, our passion that we would love to share with you.